Well, being a parent is a challenge in the best of times, but with the middle of COVID restrictions, that challenge seems to get a lot harder. Joining us today to discuss this is Gary Mason, pastor of Medicine Hat Family Church. Welcome to Bridge City News, Pastor Gary.
Awesome. Great to be with you. Thanks.
Absolutely. So, are you hearing from parents in your community that COVID restrictions and kids having to stay home, not getting to socialize with friends, that it's causing more tensions in families?
Yeah, totally. I mean, when you think about it, I like to think a lot of times from a biblical perspective, being a pastor of a Christian church and everything. And so I think all the way back to Genesis, when God first created man, and he makes this statement. We always use it when it comes to marriage, but it really applies to everything, that it's not good for man to be alone. We were created for relationship. And when that gets limited, that causes problems. And our own mental health, let alone our children and what they're going through, the stress of all of that has created lots of issues for people, for sure.
Yeah, totally. Now, what advice do you have for parents to handle the conflicts that might be coming up with their children these days? Typically, we'll see raised voices, sarcasm, disrespect, etc. So, what advice do you have?
Yeah, well, I, it comes back to relationship a lot of times. And are we building those relationships with our children? A lot of times, I suppose in the past, we all got so busy that things were going on. And sometimes even we had teachers and I like teachers, so not against all of that, but teachers, coaches, we left the raising of our children to them, and we didn't get involved in our own children's lives. And so I think that we have to make sure that we're maintaining relationship, we're maintaining conversations. I also think that we've lost the art of conversation in our society. We have cancel culture and all of that going on that people talk about, and different things. But a lot of times we've lost the art of conversation, being able to listen with respect and speak with respect, right? And so within our homes, we should be creating an environment where we can have those conversations, and it can be a safe spot for our children to talk and everything, and keep those lines of communication with your children open, no matter what their ages. You got to keep that open. And especially as they get into their teenage and adolescent years, that's really important. So
I like that open communication. And of course, when communication is open, of course, maybe things are going to come out that, the truth comes out sometimes. So apologies can be key, right? And forgiveness. So is there a poor way and a better way to apologize?
sure. There's always one of the things that I try to do with our we have four boys, and they're all from 16 to 22. And so as we've talked to them over the years, we try to get them to just accept responsibility in the apology. If you got to apologize and justify what you're saying, then the other person then takes it oftentimes as an attack on them again. And so what you want to do is just straight up take responsibility for your part of it. Even if you weren't to blame, maybe you weren't wrong in how it was done, but they felt wronged. They felt like, and so sometimes you have to apologize and just say, you know what, at least I'm sorry. I didn't mean for that to come across that way. I didn't mean for, and so just take responsibility. If you're always justifying, then how much responsibility are you really taking? And that's a big deal in the conversation.
Very good advice. Now, teens and young adults, screen time is always up in their lives. But of course, during COVID time, social media use has risen even more significantly, hasn't it? So what would you say to parents as to how to set boundaries when it comes to screen time or social media use?
Well, I think it's twofold in some of that. Number one is, are we checking the boundaries in our own life? And then are we talking about the boundaries with our kids, which goes back to relationship and conversation and talking to them, not just telling them here's the boundary, but telling them why the boundary's there. And there's lots of information online about the struggle that comes when there's too much screen time and what that does to us. And so to be able to stop and sit down and have that conversation, say, I really this is because I care about your own mental health and some of those things, and talking to them about, even as they grow and mature, and sleep patterns and overnight and all of those things, when flashes are coming on your phone and staying up all night, this doesn't doesn't help them with good development in their own process of whether it be mental health, physical health, all of that. And so to begin to talk about those boundaries, but to also display them in our own lives. Our house, at a certain time every night, the Wi-Fi goes off, and my Wi-Fi goes off as well as their Wi-Fi goes off, because the truth is that if that's true for their mental health, it's true for my mental health. And so we try to do those kind of things and have those conversations, apply the same things to our own lives and whatever. There's always exceptions, right?
Yeah.
One night you might stay up a little bit later and do some things, but
Right.
there's certain things that we can do. And that's a difficult, sometimes that's a difficult conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But leading by example, it's very smart. It's hard to do, though.
It is, because it's easy for us to get drawn in. I mean,
Mhm.
social media is, I mean, we know now that a lot of it was designed actually to draw us in and to create almost an addiction within us, and all of that. And there's lots of studies for all of that, so you can find that. But if you understand that, then you understand that I need to keep it in a place where it's not controlling me. And so if I do that for me, and I display that to my kids, and I tell them about the importance of that for both of us, then that helps.
That's very, very smart. Now, I think it's a given that your kids are likely to disagree with your boundaries, right? I'm not talking just about your kids, Gary, everybody's kids. They don't like those boundaries sometimes, even though they need them. So, any practical tips on how to communicate effectively with your kids, with kids in general,
Yeah,
on
totally.
issues like this?
Yeah, totally. I think that's a great question, because a lot of people, they yeah, they have those struggles, but that's where being a parent comes in, and not just being a friend, not just being, and that's a longer conversation, I'm sure. But the reality is we still have to direct and help. At certain stages, when my children were 3, then it was, don't touch the stove, it's hot, and I'd pull them away, and there was no question, there was no conversation. But as they grow, you have to begin to treat them differently. You have to begin to tell them why you're making these decisions. You have to begin to tell them not only why they're making the decision, but then give them an opportunity to make the decision and correct it if they're wrong, so that when the time comes and you're not around, they know how to make the right decisions, right? And so it's a process that goes. Now, if you haven't done that ahead of time, or you don't have that kind of a relationship with your children, I think you need to step back, and begin to build that relationship. And always, there's a book that was written years ago. I think it was John Trent, I'm not sure. But he wrote a book called The 2% Difference. And it talks about, rather than making big, wide changes, let's just make a 2% change today until we have that, and then make a 2% change in a week or two, or a month, or whatever. And as you slowly move the needle over, you're going to change things over time, rather than doing something that's just, it's too hard on everybody.
Now, Gary, I might be old fashioned, but is it still key for kids to play sports, or out at the park, or maybe some board games, even if it's just with their siblings or a small group of friends outdoors?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's old fashioned myself. I think it probably depends. I suppose if you all decided to go out and churn butter, that would be old fashioned. But that's not what we're talking about. And so playing a board game or playing a video, sometimes, like every family day at our family, we play one on a Nintendo, I think it is. We played a Mario and whatever Olympics as a family, right? And then we do other things that day as well. But so we have this tradition that we've done on that day, and there are other days we might do something else, and sometimes we go for motorcycle rides. We all ride and stuff, and so I
Yeah, and your
think that
kids are
it's not a
older, so they could do that.
right,
Yeah.
but but we played video games when they were younger. Now we do motorcycle rides now, but even when they were younger, they would sit on the back, right? So yeah, you have different things that you can do along the way. It's only old fashioned if what you're doing is old fashioned. The fact of spending time together will never be old fashioned. That's important for all of us, especially within the home, and especially right now when sometimes you're limited to your home. But getting out to the park as well with friends and having some time with them. Outside, I think the limit right now is 10 people in a group. And so to be able to do that, that's really important as well, because they need that interaction. And you know what? I don't run with them like their friends run with them anymore. When they play football, I might play football with them, but I'm the guy that jogs now. I'm 51, so I'm the guy that jogs now. And so they need those guys around them too, and they need those relationships too. So
That's awesome. So a big part of parenting is the process of passing your faith on to your children, if you are a person of faith, of course. So how can we do this effectively?
I think at that point you've got to talk about living it out in front of them. I think you've got to allow what you believe to be seen in them and discuss it with them. Again, if I want to transfer something to them, I got to talk about it. I've got to then live it out and be real in front of them. If I'm struggling, as they get older, I even talk to them about my struggles and things, and as well as all the victories and all of that along the way. And so just allowing yourself to be real, allowing yourself to have that relationship and growing it with them. So
That's awesome. Now, with that said, how important is it for families to be part of a local church in order to thrive spiritually?
yeah, well, I'm a pastor, so I believe in the power of the local church, right? But I think community is really huge, and when you have a community that is working towards the same goal, like growing as Christians and reaching out as and evangelizing, having what would you call it, compassion ministries within your community, feeding the hungry or clothing those who are poor, doing all those things, is reaching out in different parts of the world. Whatever it is that we're doing within the church and within those things, being together, doing that together with other people is really important. Actually, we've homeschooled our boys for a number of years, and one of the things that's really interesting in some of my studies of that was that the only time they spend all their time with people of their age is in school. As soon as you graduate school, you go to college, you get a career, you're in a job, you're with people of all different age groups. And so one of the things that you find is that if all they ever do is spend time with their age group, they actually lack certain identity strengths. They will have at times even identity crisis that they go through because they don't know who they are. Whereas when you get them into a larger group, a larger community with adults and everything, and those adults then endorse them and speak into their lives and have those conversations as well, adult endorsement for those young people brings more strength to their identity than their peers does.
That's amazing. And it's one of those things that you might not think about because, they tend to hang out with people of their own age group. But that is really
and
good
and when you
advice.
talk about family time and you talk about sharing your faith, what better way than to do that within the context of whether it be worship or listening to the word that's being preached or prayer and all of those things. Those are really intimate times. I think I don't think enough believers recognize the value of the local church. As a matter of fact, my 16-year-old, I shared a couple of the questions that we were going to go over today with a couple of my boys today. And my 16-year-old said to this question, he said, I don't think people realize the importance of that. And he's 16.
Wow. Spoken from the teen right there. Wisdom. We can learn from them, can't we?
Oh man, I learn from them so much all the time.
I bet.
And today's world is different than our world. We can't look at it and say, well, why aren't you like me? Or why,
Yeah.
man, it's just a totally different world, like it was for us with our parents.
Yeah, totally. So, what do you say to parents who maybe feel that they've messed up already? It might be just too late for their kids at this point. Is it ever too late?
I don't think it's ever too late. I think that there's always opportunity. I'll admit that if you don't do it when they're young, or you did it really when they were young and treated them like they were 3 all the way till they were 23, then you have problems and there's things to overcome. But I think again, you work on that 2-degree difference. You begin to make small changes in your relationship. You begin to reach out in ways until you build that relationship. Sometimes we see parents who want to really bring in a lot of controls and boundaries and do all that, but they don't have the relationship. Typically when somebody's telling somebody what to do and there's no relationship, a lot of times we could call that abuse even. And so certainly to a young person that can feel like that. So make sure you build the relationship. Just take time wherever you're at to begin to build that relationship.
What fantastic advice. Thanks so much for being with us today, Gary, and for passing on your wisdom and knowledge.
Well, it's been my pleasure. I'll, I'll tell anybody that I can, anything I can help them with. So praise
That's
the Lord.
awesome. Thank you so much. Gary Mason is the pastor of Medicine Hat Family Church. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.